Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana May and
Jackie Sanders. We're two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for hanging an exhibition, because as an artist, making the art is step one of the process. But oftentimes for smaller displays, whether it's at a coffee shop, a restaurant, a community center, the artist is actually in charge of hanging the artwork itself, which if you're an emerging artist can sometimes come as a shock of like, all right, I guess I'll just figure it out. So we want to share some of those tips and tricks that we've learned along the way.
Absolutely. So, we think this episode will be great, especially if you're an emerging artist or maybe you're adding new mediums and substrates to your body of work. Perhaps you haven't displayed your work before, or it's been a while since you have. So we're just going to share some little refreshers here and there. And these are basically a lot of it is what we've learned, quote unquote, the hard way through our experience. You know, at least I don't know about you, Jackie. I still haven't seen a book that talks all about hanging an exhibition, but that's a story for another day. But yes, we want to share with you some of the things we've learned, some of it, you know, some bumps and mistakes we've made and the things we've learned from it.
Exactly. And as someone who got a degree in art, I actually got my master's in a very long title, material culture and public humanities, but my focus was actually in exhibition design. I feel like it's one of those practices that when done the right way, no one thinks twice about it. But when you go in an exhibition space and you're like, why is that painting hanging all the way up there? Or why are all these things not level? If you don't do it correctly, people notice. But when you do it correctly, it's like, oh yeah, well, of course, they're all just like perfectly laid out. But when you then become an artist and saying, oh, I have to hang my own work, it can be confusing. So like, where do I start? What do I have to focus on? And different places do it differently, as we talked about earlier. Like some galleries, they hang the show themselves, especially if it's a group exhibition, if they have a curator. But for things like co-working spaces, things like coffee shops, maybe you have to bring your own hooks. Maybe they have hanging wire there that you just latch onto your paintings. Maybe they have metal rod system. Every place does it differently. And especially as an emerging artist, when I moved to Raleigh, that was part of that learning curve. Even as someone who got a master's essentially in exhibition design, the spaces that I was hanging artwork had a different hanging system than some of these places I was displaying in. And you kind of learn as you go. It's one of those many skills as an artist that you just add to your tool belt, but it's definitely worth noting today in this episode to kind of give you a sneak peek of what you may come across when you start exhibiting your work. And a few things that you might want to remember as you're packaging up your artwork to bring it to a coffee shop, bring it to a co-working space. You'll also have to think about, how am I going to be hanging this on the wall?
Absolutely. And especially if you work in various mediums and substrates like I do, you know, something else you'll face is that not all venues are prepared or optimized for anything other than 2D canvas work. So that's something you're going to have to keep an eye out for. So, you know, to kind of give you an example, like some of my sculptures can hang on a wall, but others actually need pedestals, and possibly a glass case if it's a venue that has perhaps a lot of younger visitors that may try and pick up the pieces. So that's something to definitely think about, where a coffee shop might be like, yeah, bring it over, but could somebody actually try to pick it up and drop it in its ceramic? So what happens in that case, right? I also have a number of unframed paintings on paper that would require magnetic thumbtacks or some other way of clipping them to the wall. So if all they have is hanging wire, then the question becomes like, how do you do it where it still looks like the presentation is still good? Also, can you make holes in the wall with, you know, thumbtacks? Most people don't care. The holes are very small, but maybe they don't. Maybe they just don't. Maybe the wall is stone and good luck. You're not going to get a thumbtack through that anyway. So things to definitely consider. I will say though, you know, throughout my experience, like I didn't know, see, this is something I learned too, is I didn't know that those sawtooth hangers are very much frowned upon almost anywhere. At least if they're used to exhibiting artist work, amongst other things, because it can scratch the surface of the wall when you're trying to hang things. A lot of places are like, absolutely not. And, you know, through some trial and error, I had to learn, you know, if it's a 2D canvas painting, most of the time, D-rings and wire seems to do the trick. It's accepted, it's convenient. And if you run out, you can go to almost any hardware store and get more. So It took a while to learn some of those things that, when you're first starting out, you don't think about. But as you progress in your artistic career, that's when you start realizing every opportunity is different, every space has different requirements. They all have different hanging systems, and you just gotta roll with the punches, essentially, but also be prepared.
Mm. Exactly. And ultimately, that is the first tip before going into any exhibition opportunity is to talk to the exhibition organizer first. Typically, there'll be a contract in place. Depending on the venue, they have various levels of formality. Again, especially if it's more of a coffee shop that just wants to highlight local artists, you may have one or two pieces there. They might not have a formal contract, in which we talk in our business community about having contracts that you can bring to the table that aren't super intimidating, aren't super stressful, but still kind of cover all your bases. So if you're part of our business community, you already have templates for those ready to use. But you need to figure out like who is in charge of what. So having dates that are clarified, figuring out, okay, when can you announce to the world that you're being featured in this exhibition or having this exhibition? Maybe there's some marketing limitations of, hey, you can't announce it until this date that you should be aware of, so you don't accidentally spoil a surprise, so to speak. Or with the marketing materials, what does the coffee shop or the restaurant need in order to promote that you and your beautiful artwork are showing in their space? Oftentimes they'll ask for images of your work, they'll ask for a headshot, your social media handles so they can tag you or post on their social media. And will they be doing any of that? Again, it doesn't have to be oh, as an artist, you are requiring them as a restaurant to highlight your work, but it's something for you to think about or even plant the seed in their mind, because making it easier for them to promote you will mean they're probably more likely to do it. But also having that expectation up front of, are you going to be marketing your work solely, or are they going to help in the marketing of your display in their coffee shop, restaurant, or community center?
Yeah. Also with that, it just kind of brings me to the also, is it just you, or is this like a group situation where there's several artists highlighted, and how are they going to handle that, and how much falls on you responsibility wise, especially with the marketing? Are they going to help with any of the expenses if there's anything printed that goes along with it? Which we'll dive into a little bit more, but logistically, I'm always like looking at the logistics, like time wise, with so many competing deadlines. It's like, okay, some of the first things you need to figure out and look at your calendars. When do you need to deliver the work by? Are you delivering this in person? Are you shipping this? Like, when does it need to arrive by, be postmarked by, etc.? Once it arrives, who's in charge of installing the work? Are you going to be the one bringing the step stool and doing it in off hours when the staff isn't there, or are they going to do it? Like, how that's going to work? Who's in charging of printing any exhibition materials, that are related to the venue itself? Like, are they going to do a booklet that has your artist statement, maybe the pricing of your work? Are they going to be labels, any kind of signs hanging around the place? Are they going to split up the cost with you, or are you solely responsible? And regardless who's paying for it, who's going to set it up as well? Who's going to hang it up? Is
Mhm.
there a table that it's going to go at? Is it going to get stuck to the wall? Like, logistics, where's the stuff going to go? Who's going to pay for it? And where's it going to go?
Mhm.
Um, and then, of course, extremely important, obviously, we all want sellout shows. That would be fantastic. Okay, maybe not 100% solid, because that might mean your work needs to go up in price, but that's a different story. But you definitely want to consider, okay, the exhibition's over. What happens now? Are they going to ship it back? Do you have to go pick it up? When do you have to go pick it up? A lot of times they'll have very specific windows, and also read those contracts, people, in the fine print. Sometimes they'll say, if you don't come by and pick it up within X number of days, it ain't yours anymore. So definitely, or they're going to charge you for storage. I've seen those too. So definitely nitpick everything, read everything. But you definitely want to make sure you check, like, are they going to wrap up the work for you? Do you just show up and they put it in the back of your car and you're ready to go? Or do you have to do that? Like, what is involved? If you don't know, and if it's not on, especially if it's a call, ask, ask, ask. Better to ask and have them go, I actually didn't think about that. And then you explore that and have any unpleasant surprises later on down the road.
Exactly. And especially as artists, if you're approaching, let's say, a coffee shop or a restaurant or a community center that may have some artwork up on the walls, but they don't necessarily have a set rotating exhibition program, right? Like they just love highlighting local artists for varying amounts of time. A lot of the time, you as the artist are often educating the business owner on things that they do have to think about. So a lot of those questions, because they're the master of their business and we as artists are masters of our work in showing it. So hopefully a lot of those ideas and questions that we brought up are helpful with starting those conversations. But if you are in charge of hanging the artwork in this space, which I found was often the case for a lot of the venues that I was hanging in over the past few years, there's this kind of a checklist that you want to make sure that you hit. And so we have a full brushed out list of the Level Up Artist Business community that we have with all of our artists. So you can download that PDF if you're a member and use it as a physical checklist. But really, when in doubt, the goal is to be over prepared, right? Especially if there is not a set system in place with an institution, with a community center, with a restaurant, then they often don't know what is needed. They don't think about those things like a QR code next to your artwork so that people can go directly to your social media or your website. They don't think about, oh yeah, have a display of business cards so that people can follow up with you as the artist and stay connected. And I have found through my experience, like when in doubt, bring more than is needed, because oftentimes if you already have it there and you just essentially ask permission on the spot, like, hey, do you mind if I hang a sign right here? Just a simple 8.5 by 11 that talks about like me, my work with the QR code, my website. They're normally super informal about it, especially if you're the one hanging the work, because they're like, oh yeah, sure, do your thing, rather than having to make it a super formal process. Like if they treat it informally, you can also treat it somewhat informally, and then over deliver with your professionalism when you install. So when it comes to hanging though, as Adriana mentioned earlier, especially for 2D paintings, 2D mediums, you want to make sure that you have very strong D-rings and wire to hang your work. Of course, you'll need a hammer or hooks, depending on the hanging system that they have in place. You'll want a step stool. You'll want a level to make sure all of your pieces look perfectly level, maybe some varying sizes, a big level, a small level, depending on the space and the size of your work. And also those like miscellaneous things that are just good to have on hand, such things like scissors, tape, a cardstock with marker. Maybe if you are doing labels, there was one label that got messed up with install. So having a temporary label that you can write is super, super helpful. And it's just great to have on hand, which again, these are all things that I know from my experience have led to oh crap, it would be really nice to have a pair of scissors right now to cut down this wire to be shorter. And you're either like asking the restaurant owners for it, or you have to drive back to your studio. So along the way, it's always just better to be over prepared with those miscellaneous tools. And as you get those repetitions going, as you get that experience under your feet, you kind of have it down to a system at that point. But hopefully these list of things, as well as the many more on our more fleshed out list at the Level Up Artist Business community, are helpful for avoiding some of those catastrophes and last minute panics of, oh crap, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I think of those and I'm like, just grab one of those hardware store buckets and just throw all that extra stuff in, pop it in the back of your car. And if you need any of it, great. And if you don't, well, whatever. Like you just transported it and you had it at hand. Because I'm like, say you are installing and it is off hours and the stores are closed on a Sunday evening. Yeah. And there's no Walmart anywhere in sight. Yeah. Better to have all that stuff in hand. And also besides the bucket, have some other way to transport your stuff. Yeah, I'm going to add that one to the list, having some sort of cart or dolly that you can use to get the stuff to and from. So with those, again, we have more in our community, but just wanted to give you a little preview of some of the information that we put together for you. But before we keep going, next up, we're going to be talking about our best advice for hanging an exhibition. But first, we want to put in a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by the Level Up Artist Business Community. This ever-evolving membership values community over competition and growing connections with fellow creatives who share the same goals and challenges as you.
Life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Art school or self-taught, emerging or seasoned professional, there's a lot of information out there, but what do working artists actually need?
Other industries have continuing education programs for their professionals to sharpen up their skills and stay up to date with the systems, technology, and tools needed to succeed. And we believe that artists should too.
We've spent countless hours of trial and error weeding through tons of information to find the gold and creating sustainable systems that actually work so you don't have to waste your time going down endless rabbit holes.
We are passionate about exchanging ideas and sharing resources with fellow career-minded artists about the business side of art. From artist documents and exhibition prep to templates and tools to help you work faster and smarter, our course modules cover everything from social media to technology and sustainable studio practices too.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartisthub.com to learn more, get immediate access, and level up your creative career today.
So welcome back. Now we're going to be talking about our tips for hanging an exhibition, which again, really nothing beats experience. Nothing beats getting that repetition under your belt. But one thing that I really learned both when I was getting my master's and now as a working artist who's hanging my own exhibitions and helping other artists hang theirs is having a plan in place beforehand is really the ultimate hack for a seamless, stress-free installation process. Because especially one, when it comes to knowing how many pieces you need to bring with you, right? Whether it's an entire space, whether it's one wall, you need to know, okay, if I have a 10-foot wall, I don't want to bring 3 4-inch paintings and think it's going to fill it, right? Obviously, that's an extreme example, but you want to know that the inventory that you're bringing fit the wall well. Visually, they go well together, and having kind of a roadmap when you get on site to install, so that in that way, all you're doing is executing. Especially if you recruit some help, whether a family member, whether a fellow artist to come and help you hang the show. It's nice having, hey, here's our end map of what this space will look like. Let's execute it. So this is something I started doing last year, and it was super helpful and is really easy to do in a free software such as Canva. So all you have to do is get the dimensions of the wall, import the photos into Canva, and make sure that they are all to scale to each other. Then you're able to plan out how the work is going to be laid out. Are you going to do one row where they're all centered? Are you going to do 2 rows? Is it going to be more of a salon style where there's multiple pieces all mixed together? Because then that way, again, once you have that plan in place, it takes out the big variable of, oh no, do I need to pack more paintings? Did I pack too many? How will this all look? Plus, from an exhibition design standpoint, you can make those decisions because you have the visuals of your paintings. You have the exact pictures to see, oh, well, let me really pair these oranges together, or these really look good when balanced on either side of the center painting. Visually, it creates that stability. And that's really where the fun of exhibition design can come in, of making relationships between paintings that maybe you didn't see the relationship before, but you can create that narrative. And that's really when the magic of an exhibition comes to life. So making sure that you are having a plan before you actually install the day of. So the day of, everything's packed, you have all your tools, you have your roadmap in place, and all you have to do is just execute it.
Absolutely. And I love that, that technical side you discovered of like how to put it up and like how to see the behind the scenes. For me, going back to the logistics, of course, I try to look at the inventory itself. Like, what do I actually have that I would like displayed in the space? And I say like because that's not always possible. Even if you had seen the space before, maybe there's some new constraint in place, or maybe they're renovating something. I don't know. You got to be prepared, right? So I always try to think of like, especially using different mediums on substrates, are going to need any kind of special tools, hooks, hardware, etc. Do you have any artwork that's suspended? Can the space accommodate it? Maybe you have to put the suspended piece a little closer to the wall than you want it to, but that's where they can fit it. Definitely have to think about that. Do you need any pedestals and cases? Will you need to bring your own if they don't have any? Is any of the things that you're bringing, any of the pieces so heavy that you need a second pair of hands or some kind of specialized equipment? Definitely got to think about that. Does it fit through the door? um Definitely have to think about that. Because sometimes you'll see pictures of the space and it looks wide and spacious and everything else, but it's like, wait, this piece needs a loading dock. They may not have a loading dock, so definitely something to consider. Also, is there additional media you would like to incorporate? If you wanted to have audio and video be a part of your exhibition, does the space allow it? And if so, do they have the necessary equipment? Maybe the speakers they have are a little more aged than you would like and don't sound as crisp. Could you have some kind of video feed going instead, or headphones or things of that nature? So things to definitely consider. And then this bears repeating. You have to bring extra hardware with you, folks. Hammer, duct tape, nails, hanging hooks, level, measuring tapes, the works, like we were mentioning. Have it in a bag, have it in a bucket, have a way to transport the stuff. But it bears having the extra, and definitely not needed than the other way around. Plus, the space will appreciate you. Maybe they are running low on hooks. Maybe, someone in staff misplaced the hammer and they're like, I'm so sorry. I don't know where it is right now. We're searching. Instead, you can just make it nice and a seamless experience for them and for yourself, and go, oh, that's all right. I have 2 hammers in my bucket. We're good. Which one do you need? Do you need the rubber mallet or do you need the basic one? You know what I mean? Like, just make it a little easier for yourself when it comes to, hanging a show. Better to have a little extra and not need it all, for sure. But with that, we're going to wrap today's episode. We hope that you enjoyed this one.
As always, our blog will be linked in today's show notes, where you can find episode notes and links to all of our other podcast episodes.
And if you want to stay connected with us between episodes, share feedback, maybe you have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, feel free to reach us through social media at @Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artists on Instagram.
And you can also visit levelupartisthub.com to join our business community. You can get immediate access to templates, resources, and course modules like the ones we were referencing on the episode, so that you can level up your creative career today.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.